I'm Aditya, and I'm an engineer in Geo. And in my 20% time, I'm working with the Personal Growth series, and we're trying to bring you more resources to help you improve your life and your work. So in that spirit, I'm here today to introduce Dr. Dan Siegel. He's co-director of the Mindful Awareness Research Center at UCLA. He's clinical professor of psychiatry at the UCLA School of Medicine, where he's also on the faculty of the Center for Culture and Brain and Development. Dr. Siegel is author of Mindsight, The Mindful Brain, The Mindful Therapist, and Parenting from the Inside Out, which he co-authored with Mary Hartzell. So Dr. Siegel previously came and talked to us in 2009, and I did this morning. We're lucky to have him back at Google, really fortunate. And he came before the publication of his book, Mindsight. So he's here today to kind of deliver some new insights, if you will, on Mindsight, and why it's applicable to you, how you can cultivate it for personal and professional growth. So that's all from me. I'd like to turn over the mic to Dan.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you, Aditya, and thank you, Google, for having me here. Can you hear okay in the worlds wherever we're projecting? Yes, wonderful. Great. So today we're going to talk about something called taking time in, and it builds on this concept of Mindsight, which I spoke about at Google University a few years ago. And it allows us to go deeply into the idea of asking the question, what brings health into our lives, by looking at what the mind is. And I'm happy to report to you an unhappy statistic, which is that I've asked 100,000 mental health professionals now if they've ever been given a lecture that defined what the mind is, and what percentage of 100,000 people all around the planet, from the field of mental health, psychiatry, psychology, social work, nursing, what percentage do you think have been given a definition of the mind? It's very low. It's 2 to 5% all around the planet, which is an amazing number. So this first question, and are the slides available to everyone to see, or we can show them later? The first question is, what is the mind? And if to Google or anywhere we want to say we want to help cultivate a healthy mind, how can we start to address that question if we don't have a definition of the mind? So the work I do in a field called interpersonal neurobiology tries to address this question head-on by offering a working definition of the mind, at least one aspect of the mind, that allows us to develop a healthy mind. Does that make sense? So in doing this, then, in walking through this, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to walk through the science of the mind. We're going to ask the question, how do you develop health of the mind? And then if we have time, we're going to actually do a practice that will increase the health of your mind. Okay, so here we go. So the first thing to say in addressing this is that we have a kind of challenge ahead of us. You can see here that the issue now in the modern age, and certainly our internet is a part of it, is that we're having this ever-expanding world of external things drawing our attention to it. Attention is the process that regulates the focus of energy and information, really, and we experience it every day. You focus attention on this, or if I go like this, you focus your attention on my clapping my hands. And the internet provides us with this infinite set of stimuli that draws our attention outward. And one of the main messages of today's talk is we need to balance that by having a focus of attention inward. And as you'll see, it actually helps cultivate the parts of the brain that generate health. And I'm going to now present that to you now. But this is the issue, that the focus of attention externally is far from the world of the circuits that calm us or the interactions with other people that calm us. So if you're feeling sometimes a lot of stress and anxiety, here are some of the reasons that might be the case. That if we're constantly, that is perpetually focusing on external things, we can have this persistent sense of incompletion. You know, how do you ever finish things? You know, in the old days, we used to read something you may remember called a book, and a book had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and when you finished the book, you felt like you had achieved something. But when do you ever finish anything on the web? it's endless. And that for our nervous system makes us, well, nervous. We have this nagging sense of a bottomless pit of things to do and a hidden feeling even of being invisible. All of these things create a state of dis-ease and anxiety and stress that is not of the healthy sort. So time in, as you'll see, is an approach that can help us provide an antidote to those stresses. When you say, well, if we're trying to develop a healthy self, let's just use that word for a moment before we get into the mind. What is the self? Now, amazingly, even this term doesn't have much of a definition. Now, you may think that your self resides only in your body, but actually, if you look at studies of how the self develops, which is what I'm trained in as a researcher in relationships, you find that the self is actually connected to the environment in which it's growing, right? So that your relationships with other people, the things that you do, are the context, both external, the environmental interactions we have and demands from our environment, and internal. And when we're far from the internal experiences that shape a self, then you don't have the capacity to actually change your mind toward health, as you'll see. So the self is not created in isolation. It, in fact, if you can see from this diagram, is created at least in two places. One is the embodied brain, that is this nervous system that's distributed throughout the whole body, which we'll just call the brain for short, and relationships. And what I want to ask you to do is reflect for a moment, how would relationships in your life be related in any way to your interpersonal relationships, beginning there? How could that be? And then you see on this triangle we have the mind. What is the connection between relationships, the brain, and the mind? Now that by itself could be an entire semester at a university, which is what I do, and we teach about this. You could take this one slide and you could actually spend an entire semester focusing on how do these three things go together. So for the purpose of our talk today, I'll just say that we see the mind, in fact, as emerging from how energy and information flow is shared in relationships. So relationships are defined as the sharing of energy and information, like I'm doing with you right now. And the brain, the embodied nervous system, is the bodily mechanism through which energy and information flows. You may remember from basic biology that the nervous system is basically a system of interconnected neurons and the supportive cells around them called glia. And essentially what it's all about is electrochemical energy flow. And sometimes those patterns have symbolic value, and we call it information. So energy and information flowing through the body is what the nervous system is all about. And relationships are all about, right now I'm sending something to you, you receive it, it's energy I'm sending to you. Sometimes if I go, blah, 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 there isn't much symbolic value to it. Sometimes I might say Golden Gate Bridge, and suddenly that phrase, Golden Gate Bridge, has symbolic informational value. So basically, in science, we talk about an emergent property that arises from complex systems that's called a self-organizing process. And this self-organizing process is what I'm going to propose to you is what the mind is. And that the mind is not just in your body, but it's also emerging in your relationships. And the way to really imagine that is the system that you're looking at is patterns of energy and information flow that are not restricted to your skin. You're immersed in a pattern of energy and information flow. Just think about what you do at Google. Think about what you do on the internet. Think about what you do in your life. We are constantly immersed in energy and information flow sharing. Now, when that's only externally focused, we get very limited in what we can do. Now, how do you embrace health in this view? This is, again, an entire semester's worth on one slide, but it goes like this. Through a long line of reasoning that in all the different books I've published, you'll see the science behind this. So you may say, well, where's the science behind that? It's published, but I just want to give you the take-home message. Health, if you say, I want to develop a healthy mind, health arises from a process called integration. Integration, defined this way, as the linkage of differentiated parts. So let's take, for example, your own brain. if you don't allow the two sides of your brain to be differentiated and be specialized in the unique, wonderful ways that they are, and then also become linked, you can show a person will have restrictions in health. And you can show this literally on an MRI. You can show in a relationship, let's say someone you live with, if you're not honoring each other's differences and promoting healthy, caring communication, that's the linkage part, it won't be a healthy relationship. Now, how do you know when a system is not healthy? This is how you know. When an integration is happening, whether it's in your nervous system or in your relationships, it's harmonious. It's flexible, adaptive, and it has a certain stability and energy and vitality to it. That's the integration piece. But when integration is not happening, you move to chaos or rigidity. Now, you can look at subtle forms of chaos where you just feel like life isn't what you want it to be and you just feel you're in turmoil, or rigidity. I feel numb. There's no meaning to my life. I feel kind of disconnected from myself, other people, my body. That would be an example of rigidity. Or the extremes, of course, you can show major forms of illness. But even in the subtle ways that our health is compromised, this graph of chaos and rigidity basically explains a lot of what happens in human life. So here's what I'm going to propose to you, is the following. That time-in practices, which we're going to talk about right now, time-in practices are the way you integrate both your nervous system, that is your embodied energy and information flow patterns, and your relationships. And again, everything I'm saying, when I hear myself say it, I say, that sounds too simple. Luckily, there's literally thousands of scientific articles that support these slides. So these are like the take-home, how do I make use of this? So just look at any of the books that I've been a part of publishing or written myself. And here's the bottom line. Time-in practices, which we're going to define in a moment, they cultivate integration. So if you say, well, at work, let's say at Google, what should I do? Or anywhere you work, what should I do with my life? And you say, well, at least you should be doing a time-in practice. And though the body is clean and beautiful and wonderful, and our relationships are clean and beautiful and wonderful, if you think about brushing your teeth, right? How many of you brush your teeth? Okay. Now, actually, there was a time when we didn't brush our teeth. And what was a problem with not brushing our teeth? Our teeth became unhealthy. Our gums became unhealthy, right? We didn't have good dental hygiene. Well, time-in practices are all about keeping the mind fit, keeping the brain integrated, and keeping your relationships empathic and supportive. That's what time-in does. And there's an extensive amount of literature behind what I'm saying, so let me just give you the bottom line. You say, if integration is health, I want health in my life. Great. How do you achieve it? You have a regular time-in practice, just like you have a regular brushing of your teeth. We need to start creating, not only in you, that all of you who work here, but we need to think creatively. How can systems like Google that influence the mind of humanity take an active part in making time-in a regular practice throughout the planet? Because this is a serious moment when actually we can start influencing people to create health in their lives. Now, how does that work? Well, here's the proposal. There's something called attunement, which again these are all very deep processes, but the bottom line is attunement is where you focus attention on the internal nature either of someone else in a relationship. So like if you're close to someone, you don't just respond to their behavior, you respond to what's going on inside of them, their thoughts, their feelings, their memories, their hopes, their dreams. That's the key to a healthy relationship. And a time-in practice actually builds the circuits of the brain, bless you, that not only allow you to tune into others with more power and specificity, which it does, but it also allows you to develop the circuits of internal attunement, where an observing part of yourself actually tunes into an experiencing part. And when you do that, there's a sense of safety, stability, clarity, and coherence that is in your own mental life. So if you say, oh my God, my life is so feeling chaotic and crazy, I just feel sort of afraid, this gives you a feeling of safety, stability, clarity, and coherence. And when you look at the brain, you can actually show that the parts of the brain that regulate the brain and give a feeling of safety, stability, clarity, and coherence, all the things that time in gives you, you can show that those parts of the brain, for those of you who like the science, are the circuits that link widely separate areas to each other. Widely separated areas are the differentiated parts of the nervous system, and you can show that the circuits which link them, which are called, of course, integrative circuits, are the circuits that are stimulated to be active with time and practices and to grow. Now here's the secret to the sauce. Integrative circuits in the brain are regulatory circuits. So if you say, I want to learn how to really bring myself more into balance, to coordinate and balance my whole bodily experience, time and practices are the root. Integrative focus of the mind stimulates the growth of integrative circuits in the brain, which are regulatory. So that's it in a nutshell. Whether you're doing that internally or doing that with the internal world of someone else, attunement is an integrative form of communication that allows you to stimulate the growth of these integrative fibers of the brain. That's the whole secret. Okay. So Mindsight is how we do this, because it's a teachable capacity that I'm going to teach you about right now to monitor the flow of energy and information within relationships in the embodied brain. So from this talk, I hope you're seeing, if you say, well, hold on, Dan didn't tell us where the mind was. Well, this one aspect of the mind, not subjective experience necessarily or awareness, those are very important in different aspects of the mind, but the regulatory aspect of the mind is in your body and it's in your relationships. The body is really, really important, and your relationships are really, really important. They're not just coincidental. For any of us who are focused on technology and science, like I am too, we can kind of focus on all the interesting concepts, the data, all the technological aspects and the scientific findings, and we can forget about relationships and forget about the body. But in fact, they're the essence of health. And so we can make ourselves non-integrated and do well in these areas, but in fact, it isn't being integrated. Now, once you learn to monitor with more clarity, you can then modulate toward integration, and that's what the whole Mindsight approach is about, which is summarized on this slide, just to review, because now we're going to dive into the practice. Basically, we've defined the mind. Even though 100,000 professionals have revealed that even the field of mental health doesn't have a definition of mind, you're going to be shocked to find the field of psychology doesn't have a definition of mind, the field of the philosophy of mind doesn't have a definition of mind, the field of cognitive neuroscience does not have a definition of mind, the field of education does not have a definition of mind. So mental health is not alone. It turns out there actually isn't a definition of the mind. It's kind of wild, and believe me, those are amazing conversations to have with people in all those fields. So we're offering a definition of mind as an emergent process, and I'm going to teach you how to regulate energy and information flow right now. Relationships and the body are important. I'm going to teach you how to monitor energy and information flow and then modify it. And harmony, if you do this practice, because I've done this now with thousands and thousands of people, this time and practice I'm about to teach you creates harmony in people's lives. And the emails that you could analyze when they come in have such similar discussions of these kinds of features of how it promotes integration. Okay, and these are just to remind us that the brain has two halves, and it actually works to integrate both halves as well. Okay, now if you say, well, okay, what's the bottom line? What does science tell us is going to improve if I do a time and practice? The middle prefrontal areas, this area right behind your forehead, are massively integrative areas of the brain. And these are 9 functions right here that are science proven to be enhanced with time and practices. Now, what's a time and practice? It draws on the studies of mindfulness. It draws on all sorts of studies of mentalization. It draws on the studies of attachment research. This is the idea that when you mentalize, or that is look at the mental side of life, whether it's in a mindfulness practice or an attachment relationship, these are the functions that are enhanced. And it's an amazing group of 9 functions, actually. These are the integrative aspects of middle prefrontal function. Okay, so we're going to do monitoring and modifying. So if you say, well, hold on, what did Dan say the mind is composed of? Well, it's regulatory, like when you regulate a car. you have to monitor where you're going and then modify where you're going. You move the steering wheel, you press the brakes, press the accelerator. So why shouldn't we train people to develop the skill of the mind, once we've defined it as regulatory, to literally monitor and modify? Now, what if I gave you a camcorder and it wasn't stabilized with a tripod and it was all shaky? What would the video that we got out look like? It would be blurry. Shaky in, blurry out. And how much detail could you see if it was a blurry video? Not as much as you want. And when it's blurry, you actually can't do something very specific with what you see, right? So if you think of it that way, then what we want to do is take a Mindsight camera, which is basically your mind, and you're going to develop the ability to build a tripod. So literally, you're going to stabilize this part of your mental experience that allows you to look at the mind itself so that what you see is no longer blurry. Now, amazingly, this is the first step that allows you then to modify toward integration. If you can't see clearly, you can't modify with any specificity because you can't see anything. So it's kind of that simple. Now, you're going to see that we're going to build on the sense of openness to what is. This is one leg of the triangle. Objectivity, that is seeing that a thought or a feeling or even a sensation in your body is not the totality of who you are. It's like an object. You have an awareness. It's like the thing that you know about. It's not the experience of knowing. And the observation is the fact that there is a you that is observing. So you don't get lost in like an impulse or lost in a negative thought. You say, oh, that's just a negative thought. It comes and goes. When people are lost in their negative thoughts, it ruins their day. When someone has this skill, they go, oh, it's a negative thought. I won't take it so personally, right? Now, what are the practices we have? Well, it's basically a way of attuning to an observing self, that this observing self, you activate it, and you then figure out what's an experiencing self going through. And you can focus inwardly. That's what we're going to do. This is the time in. And it's a form of inner attunement. We're going to do these practices right now, a breath awareness practice and a wheel of awareness practice. And the benefit of doing this is that you will experience right now what we're talking about. So it isn't just an idea, you'll actually experience it. Now, you don't need to take notes on what we're about to do, because from my website for free, you can download digitally into whatever object you have the audio recording of these processes. But this will give you an experience right now of what it feels like to do a time in practice. So you can see for yourself, and then if you're up for it when we're finished, though you may feel like not speaking and just letting yourself reflect on what happened by yourself, that's fine. If people would like to offer what their experience was as scientists, as technicians, you may find it actually fascinating to hear what each other experienced. If you don't want to do that, that's absolutely fine also. Let me just see first, before we get into this, if there are any questions. Does it make sense so far? Yep? Okay, great. So let me just show you what we're going to work on. This is what we're going to work on. This is called a wheel of awareness practice. It was created, if you take the concept of integration and apply it to awareness, you say, what is differentiable in your experience of being conscious or being aware? And it says, okay, one thing you can differentiate is, let's say, the 5 senses that bring in the outside world. And that you see there in the outer rim, these first 5 senses. You also can be aware of what your body signals are, like what's going on in your heart or your lungs. And that's called, in science, we call that the 6th sense, or interoception. There's also what you can call a 7th sense, which is your awareness of thoughts or images, emotions, feelings, memories, dreams, attitudes, ideas. Those would be on the 7th sense. And there's also an 8th sense, which we'll go through, which is your sense of connection to not only other people, but even the whole planet. And in many ways, the work I do in climate change issues uses time and practices to say we need to cultivate the 8th sense in humanity, because we've forgotten that we are a part of the earth. And we don't treat the earth like a part of our self. Instead, we treat it just like a trash can. And this is a serious life-endangering problem. So this time in practice not only gives you personal health, but it has the potential to increase kindness to other people, but also kindness to planet Earth. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do then is say, well, okay, fine, I differentiate these things on the rim. I can also differentiate the experience of awareness from what I'm aware of. Now you're going to say, well, that sounds kind of weird. Well, you'll experience it right now for yourself as we do this practice, because differentiating the hub from the rim, this is the vocabulary we have, empowers you actually to integrate your life in ways that the emails we get from people are just so rewarding. I mean, you'll experience for yourself. I don't need to say more editorial about that. But in terms of integration of consciousness, we're differentiating elements of the rim from each other and the hub from the rim. And just that practice alone has profound possibilities for people. Now, let's begin, and let me walk you through. If there are no questions about this, I'm going to ask you to image this wheel, but we're going to do a basic awareness of the breath practice to get you ready. And what I'm going to do, if you've never done a reflective practice before, that's fine. I do this a lot with people who have never done a time in practice, never done reflection, they've never done anything. I mean, whether you call it reflection or mindfulness or being aware of the self or mentalization or whatever, many people that I've done this with have never done it before. So you don't need to be nervous. I mean, if you're nervous, but there's no need to be. I'm going to walk you through it. So when we do this in a group, here's what I'm asking you to do. Again, you don't need to take notes, because everything we're about to do is available for free for you to do the time in practices from drdansiegel.com. You just pull it and it's yours to use however you want. So it's good to sit with a straight back, let 2 feet be flat on the floor, and even though your body's not going to move, you're actually be working out your brain a lot. So it's like a workout you're about to do. So you want to have a sense of purpose, like I'm doing something, and some people like to have their chest, with a sense of dignity, like, okay, I'm ready to do the work. So this is not a like hang loose, I'm doing a relaxation technique kind of thing. You may get relaxed, you may not get relaxed. That's not what we're trying to achieve. We're not trying to achieve anything except do this integration practice. So for the first part, what I like to do with your eyes open, let your attention come up toward me. Let it come to the middle of this room. And then send your attention back to the far wall. And then bring your attention back to the middle of the room. And then to about book reading distance, as if you were holding a book or a magazine in your hand. And notice how you can determine where your attention goes. You can determine that. And now, for this first initial practice, we're going to do something just called the breath awareness practice. And what I want you to do is see if you can sense the breath, whether it's at the level of the nostrils with the sensation of the air coming in and out, or the level of the chest rising and falling. And some people like to let their eyes go closed for this, to really let the bodily sensation of the breath fill awareness. The chest rising and falling perhaps, or even notice how you can let the attention move downward to the level of the abdomen as it moves in and out. And wherever you feel it most naturally is fine. Let that be the focus of the breath. And let me just share with you an ancient story before we do the brief breath awareness practice. And the story goes like this. It's been passed down the generations that the mind is like the ocean. And deep in the ocean, beneath the surface, it's calm and it's clear. And no matter what the conditions are at the surface, from this deep place, it's possible to just look upward and notice whether it's flat or choppy waves or even a full storm. Deep beneath the surface, it's calm and clear. And just sensing the breath allows you to just notice whatever arises in awareness, like brain waves at the surface of the mind, whether it's an emotion or a memory, an image, a thought. And you can just notice it from a place of clarity and tranquility. So this very brief breath practice goes like this. I invite you to just sense the breath wherever you feel it most naturally. And then if a distraction comes and takes your attention away from the breath, that's fine. That's just what the mind does. When you've noticed you've become distracted, just let that distraction go and return your focus to the breath. In and out, in and out. Another distraction may take you away. And some people like to just name the kind of distraction like thinking, or remembering. And for them, naming it tames it and it lets them drop the distraction and go back to the breath. Other people don't really want to do that. You can play with that. Let's just do that very brief practice where you just sense the breath, a distraction comes, and redirect attention, just like working out a muscle. You contract the muscle with the focus on the breath. A distraction is like relaxing the muscle. You refocus, it contracts the muscle. This is working the muscle of attention, really developing the strength of the mind to focus on a particular object, in this case, the breath. Let's begin that right now. That's great. And now we'll move from the breath awareness practice to the wheel of awareness practice. So what I invite you to do is just let yourself ride the wave of the breath in and out. And now either picturing in your mind the wheel, if you want to open your eyes and just look at it one more time, or just knowing about the structure of the wheel, even if you can't picture it, that's fine. Sensing the breath brings you into the hub of the mind where awareness is represented. And we're going to imagine from this hub sending out a spoke from the hub out to a particular point on the rim. And let's begin with the point on the first 5 senses that represents sound. So it's the sense of hearing. And let's let sound fill awareness. And now moving the spoke over a bit more to the sense of sight. Let any light coming through your eyes, or if your eyelids are closed, through your closed eyelids, let the light fill the sense of sight, filling awareness. And now moving the spoke over to the sense of smell, letting any odors fill awareness. And then moving the spoke over now to the sense of taste. Letting any tastes fill awareness. And now moving the spoke over one more time in this area to the sense of touch. Anywhere where the skin is touching things, the skin touching clothing or skin touching skin. And now taking a bit of a deeper breath, we're going to let these first 5 senses that bring in the external world go, and move the spoke over now in your mind's eye to the next segment of the rim. And this is the segment of the rim that represents the interior of the body. And let's begin with the facial area, letting awareness become filled with the sensation of the muscles and bones in the face. And then moving to the muscles and bones in the scalp. And now moving attention to the back of the neck and the throat. And now letting awareness be filled with the sensation of the shoulders. And then letting attention go down both arms to the fingertips. And then letting awareness be filled with the upper back and the chest. And then the lower back and the abdomen. And then moving to the hip area. And then focusing attention down both legs all the way to the toes. And now moving attention to the pelvic region, to the genitals. And then letting awareness become filled with the signals from the intestines and the stomach. And then moving attention to the interior of the lungs. And then centering attention in the heart region. And now letting awareness become filled with the whole of the body, the interior of the body, letting the whole of the body fill awareness. And now knowing that science has demonstrated what people have known for a long time, which is that the body sends signals up into the skull, into the brain and the skull, that gives us a deep, important intuition and wisdom. Just sensing the body gives you access to that bodily wisdom. I now invite you to take a bit of a deeper breath. And imagine now moving the spoke from this part of the rim of the interior of the body now to the next segment of the rim. And this is the segment that represents mental activities. And we'll do this part of the rim review in two aspects. The first aspect, I just invite you to be in the hub and just invite anything whatsoever to come from mental activities like emotions or memories, images, thoughts, attitudes, intentions, beliefs, hopes, dreams, anything at all from mental life. Let it enter into the hub of the mind where you just bring it on and just be aware of whatever is going on in mental activities. And now for the second aspect of this part of the rim review, here's what I invite you to do. Now, just like in the first part, you'll invite into awareness anything from mental activities. This time what I invite you to do is to study the way a mental activity, let's say an image, how does it first present itself to awareness? Is it sudden? Is it gradual? And once it presents itself to awareness, how does it stay present? Does it undulate? Is it vibrating? Is it continual? How does it feel as it stays in awareness? And then how does it leave awareness? Is it, again, from one side or the other, up, down? Does it just suddenly leave? Is it just replaced by another mental activity? And if it's not replaced by another mental activity, what does the gap feel like between two mental activities? So now I'm inviting you to become a student of the architecture of your own mental life, studying the comings, the staying presence, and the goings of mental activities. And let's begin that practice right now. Now I invite you to take a bit of a deeper breath. And we'll let this part of the rim go for now, where we can always explore the architecture of our own mental life. And now moving the spoke over one more time to the last segment of the rim. And this is the segment that represents our sense of connection to others or other things outside of our bodily selves. And first, what I invite you to do is let yourself become aware of your sense of connection to people who are sitting close to you right now. And then let that expand to people who are near you but not immediately next to you right now. And now let's let that sense of connection move beyond these walls to people who you work with, your colleagues. And then extending out to friends and family. And then extending out to people who live in your neighborhood. And then to people who live in your larger community. To people who share your city. To people who share your state. And people who share your country. And then allowing that sense of connection to move out to all people who share this common home, our planet Earth. And then moving that sense of connection to include all living beings on Earth. And knowing that science has now demonstrated what wisdom practices for years have known, that sending out feelings of concern and kindness out into the world actually brings positive changes, not only in the world, but even in our own physiological health, I invite you to send out compassionate concern and caring senses of intention and kindness out to all living beings on the planet. And then bringing that sense of kindness and compassion now to your inner bodily self, we bring a sense of love and kindness inwardly to our inner selves. And now I invite you to take a bit of a deeper breath. And for many, this would be a good place to stop the Wheel of Awareness practice. But people seem very focused, and I could take you very briefly to one more step, but nod your head if you're up for trying it out. And a lot of nods are going on. Okay, so if you don't want to do this, that's fine. Just keep on just focusing on the breath. But we'll try this one more. It's an advanced step, so if it's hard, don't worry about it. It's just the way it is. But let's just give it a try, and you can always come back to this another time. But again, if you're not up for it, just focus on the breath in and out. But here's how this next step goes. What I invite you to do is sense your breath in and out, and then being in the hub of the mind, imagine sending the spoke out again from the hub, but this time, instead of going to somewhere on the rim, imagine bending that spoke and sending it back to the hub itself. So now you're going to focus attention on awareness and experience what awareness of awareness feels like for you. Now, again, I invite you to find the breath, riding the wave of the breath in and out. And now, when you're ready, taking a deeper and this time more intentional breath, you can let your eyes get ready to come open if they're closed, and we'll bring this whole Wheel of Awareness practice to a close for today. Thank you and welcome back. So we have a few minutes left for today, and as I mentioned, you may feel like talking or you may not feel like talking. This was the whole Wheel of Awareness practice, a little bit faster than normal because we wanted to fit it in the time, but if you do the audio practice, you'll see it's extended out a little bit more, so you have the feel of it. But is there anyone who would like to share anything from their experience? From any part of it? Yes, please.
I just noticed that for me...
Oh, there's a microphone. I'm supposed to... There you go. Thank you.
Thanks. I just noticed that for me, certain parts were very easy, and certain parts were not very easy at all. Like, for example, when it was time to get to the seventh sense, it was very easy for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably where I spend most of my time.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas being aware of like my body or maybe connections around me, that was like, a challenge. I had to really think about how to do that.
Beautiful.
So that's pretty interesting.
That's very helpful to say. And you know, how we practice attention drives energy information flow through our nervous system. So if you spend a lot of time doing the seventh sense, it will be like a very well-developed muscle. So you're kind of finding, wow, that's an area of my rim that it might be good for me if I'm going to integrate it, is to honor the differentiated parts, develop connections to others, connections to my body. So it's a good invitation to practice that. So that's great. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else would like to share? Some people often ask, what is the hub? And I'm going to just show you, because I have 2 minutes left. Unless there's someone who wants to share something, I'm going to show you one scientific proposal for what this was all about. What you were saying is, you know, we can look from the neural side that if we need to have certain circuits developed, we can find it's harder, and those aren't as well developed. And the great news is the brain is always changing as we focus attention down it. In the next slide, this is a metaphor, the wheel of awareness. In this slide, which you'll find in the book called The Mindful Therapist, this is basically saying if we've defined the mind as a process that's both embodied and relational that regulates energy and information flow, it takes the science of energy, which is basically, as you know, the science of probabilities, not Newtonian absolutes. And it says, wow, if the mind is truly regulating energy flow, then maybe it's actually regulating degrees of certainty. So for example, if I say, let's all go to dinner and have salmon for dinner, right? That was an absolute statement I said, and on this graph, it would be a peak. I've said salmon. And maybe you say, well, I'm also in the mood for dinner, but let's go have Italian food or something. That would be another peak. And together we might have a mood of eating, which would be a plateau of probability. And finally, we would decide to go eat somewhere, so we'd pick out a particular peak and we'd eat. That shows a distribution from absolute probability, we're eating salmon, to we're in the mood or priming ourselves to eat, that's a plateau. What I want to suggest to you is those are our thoughts up at the peaks, or a mood, that's a plateau. But you can drop yourself to this open plane of possibility where you're moving energy distributions to zero probability, which means infinite possibility. And so how many of you did, when you did the hub on the hub part, felt this sense of expansion? Anyone feel that?
I actually felt more centered.
No, centered, okay. Anyone else want to share what that felt like? Well, for many people, they talk about not only being centered, but feeling like at home or at peace or in clarity. So what I want to suggest to you is that this is one scientific proposal for how the hub, when we say, let's build the hub of your mind with a time and practice, how basically you're gaining access to this open plane. So let's say you're someone who's, prone to be worried about a lot of things or, have negative thoughts about a lot of things. Those are a bunch of peaks that are driving you mad. When you develop this time and practice, you're basically strengthening the capacity of your mind by building certain circuits in the brain to actually bring you from those points on the rim down to the open plane. So in a nutshell, what I want to leave you with as a closing remark is that if you can build up through a time in practice the capacity to move yourself in different differentiated circuits of your brain, you're literally going to integrate not only your nervous system, but all the studies show that when you can do this, you become more open, literally the open plane of possibility, to what's going on inside of other people. So your relationships will be improved. You will increase creativity, because rather than being stuck on a certain pattern, you say literally, okay, this was the plan I had. These are the peaks and plateaus of trying to solve this problem in a certain way. I drop myself to the open plane, that's the hub, and from that spaciousness, I can move over to another set of peaks. So literally, creativity, connection, a sense of coherence, stability, and clarity, these are all available to us. Now, the wonderful thing is, if in a place like Google, or any of us who works to influence education, or families, or the whole of our human family, we have the opportunity actually to create not just inner health, but health among all of us in this planet in which we live. We can create more kindness, more compassion, more integration, because ultimately, if you think about it, what is integration made visible? It's kindness and compassion toward the self or toward others. What is health? Health is integration. So if we can get together and create a time in movement, facilitated literally around the planet, I believe very deeply that we can create more well-being for all of us. So thank you very much for your attention. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and I look forward to more time in together. Thank you.
You mentioned the definition of the mind, and I thought that was pretty interesting. The definition of brain seems very clear to me.
Yeah.
Brain plus nervous system.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But could you maybe reiterate what the definition of mind was? Because from my perspective, I'm not sure how to tell the difference between what you call brain and what you call mind.
Absolutely. Let's go back and just,
Yeah.
luckily that goes fast. This definition of mind there, when you look at systems science, there's something called an emergent self-organizing process. So that isn't a phrase I made up because I'm from California. That's actually a mathematical term. So think about like a classroom, the kids like each other, the teacher's supportive of the kids are exploring new things, there's the openness to be wrong, and people are creating together, and they're collaborating, and you walk into the classroom, you say, wow, the morale in this classroom is really high. Well, you never point to any individual and say, that's the source of morale. It's an emergent, self-organizing process of high morale that's arising from the interaction of the elements of the system. In this case, the system is a classroom. So what I was thinking was, I know people don't think this way, but if the system is actually energy and information flow, that's the key to thinking about it this way. Where does energy and information flow? Well, it's absolutely flowing in your body. The whole nervous system is electrochemical energy flow. And so you say, okay, fine, but it doesn't end there. You see, it's happening right now between the two of us and among all of us and all of us everywhere. And certainly Google is influencing it everywhere. So when you really embrace the issue, and certainly, I work closely with anthropologists, they love this definition because for them, they study culture. And Google is shaping culture. And culture is about energy and information flow patterns and how they're shared not only now across, people within a society, but across generations. That's what culture is. So in this way, mind becomes about energy and information flow patterns that are both embodied and relational. And you say, well, how does that happen? It's an emergent self-organizing process. The people who get upset about this, they want to own their mind. They said, no, this is my mind, And you say, well, look, do you have a relationship with someone? Yeah. Well, does your interaction with that other person's relationship affect you? Yeah. Well, we don't just come out of nowhere. We're relational. And in fact, our whole incredible movement as a human species is we don't have, big claws, we don't have big fangs. We actually have achieved what we've achieved because we collaborate. So you really understand that the mind is a relational process, literally process. So you can just drop the emergent self-organizing if it makes you feel uncomfortable, as we do in the definition process. But basically, you say, where does that word process come from? It's literally a mathematical property of the interaction of elements of a system. The elements of the system are the nodes at which energy and information is flowing. Now, those nodes can be distributed, as Google knows. Just look at your screen when you see all these people doing these things. We're all interconnected. That's the thing about it. And this just gives you the scientific view. So it's not metaphysical, it's not, any kind of anything. It's just straight science. I'm a scientist who practices as a clinician. This is a scientific proposal, and that it fits with, what attachment researchers like, or anthropologists, or contemplative practice people. We work in a field called consilience, as we try to bring in all different ways of knowing. And we're very happy that we can have people in various religions talk to each other. We can have people in various sciences talk to each other. We can have people who are just out in the field trying to make kids in schools have a better time. So we're happy that we can communicate with everybody. Interpersonal neurobiology is basically a consilient field where we invite everyone in to join together because, our species has so much wonderful potential if we awaken our minds, literally, in this way. And then when you go from this, definition of mind to health, then you've got the whole thing on 2 slides. Then you say, okay, fine. I got to monitor and modify how? Toward integration. And that's why I really wanted to do the wheel practice with you, because it's, you can see it right there. I know it was a little fast, and I want to apologize for that, but you can see it's literally integrating consciousness. So we don't want to be vague about this. I mean, I'm being super scientific about this. Sometimes people say, you're way too scientific. I say, well, that's where we should start. Everything we do should be based in science, and then we need to go out and try to help the world be a better place. But it's got to be consistent with science. That's how I stand as a scientist. That's what I feel very strongly. Does that make sense?
It does. Can I try and restate something in one
Please.
sentence and tell me if this is, you think this is
Go
accurate
for it.
or this is inaccurate? So, brain would be, my brain plus my nervous system.
Yes.
But mind, as you're defining it, would be a system or systems of brains and nervous systems exchanging information with each other. Is that correct? And themselves.
That's correct, and, so I would add an and to it.
Yeah.
If you think about what the internet does, it is affecting your mind. If you think about, like, I have a dear friend named John O'Donohue who died a couple years ago. He wrote beautifully, and his audio programs still affect people. So in these ways, it isn't just limited to a nervous system. The internet is not composed of neurons, you know what I mean? And you guys are really influencing the minds of people. So I would just stick with energy and information flow and say, for sure, the nervous system plays an important role, but you can have fiber optics that are contributing to that role too. And when we see what everyone's doing linking each other, what's really being linked is energy and information flow patterns. And with the 186,000 miles per second that the fiber optics allow things to go. I mean, I have these online things I do where I'm talking to someone in Iran and South Africa and Australia all at once. There's no lag. I mean, we're literally having this community that's created that because of that speed of light thing. I mean, it's as if I was right there with them like I am with you and with all of you. I mean, so we have this opportunity then to connect all of us. But yes, so that's why the word embodied is there. For sure, the brain and the whole nervous system, the whole body itself is really, really important. But it's not just about that. It's about our way of sharing energy information flow, however we can share it. And the internet is a huge impact on the human mind because you have such a profound influence on how energy information flow is being shared. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm still interested in that. I know you're probably running out of time. That seems like a fair definition, but then you keep using minds plural, which seems like a little bit of a misnomer because you just say any given system is a mind. Like there's a human mind, which is the system of all humans, or
Yeah.
like.
I don't think.
Yeah, human minds. Yeah.
Definition is in terms of what it is. I think the definition is in terms of what it does.
Right.
More like so. It doesn't matter what it is. We might not even understand what it is.
Well, this is a really important point. So the mind has subjective experience. This is the regulatory aspect of mind, but absolutely, the mind has, nobody knows what is subjective experience. From a scientific point of view, we have no idea. From a subjective point of view, of course we know what it is. From a scientific point of view, we have nothing to say. Awareness, same thing. Awareness, like no scientist, even though they're looking for neural correlates of consciousness, nobody knows what awareness is. We know it has the subjective quality of knowing, which is really fantastic. We have the subjective texture of that which is known, which is beautiful. Red is red, and wine tastes like wine, and you go swimming in a beautiful lake, it's gorgeous. So absolutely right. We don't know what those aspects are. But in terms of the regulatory aspect of mind, it's not the whole thing. What this helps us with, rather than having no definition, but it helps us in the work in the internet, or the work in therapy, or the work in education, the work in parenting. Here's what it helps us do. It says, let's teach people to monitor with more stability and modify toward integration. So for sure we can't say what subjectivity is in awareness. We don't know. Nobody knows, and we may never know. But that doesn't mean we can't define one aspect of mind, and then once we have a definition, say what's a healthy, that aspect of mind, and then go with it. And so the great thing is, it's like, the Willie Sutton story. Willie Sutton's this guy who robbed a bank, and so they put him in jail, they caught him, and then they pulled him out of the cell, and they said, Willie, why'd you rob the bank? And he goes, that's where the money was. So it's the same kind of thing. If we can define one aspect of the mind that directly impacts health of our individual lives, of our collective lives, of the planet's life, let's go for it. Let's actually, bite the bullet. Let's do the Willie Sutton rule. If that's where it is, let's promote integration. And let's do it by teaching people to monitor with more stability and to modify toward integration. And bam, you got it. So I think it's time we can do this. If we do this together, and that's why I said like the human mind, it is as an open system. There are lots of layers of dividing it up because there are lots of parts and stuff. So yes, you have your mind, I have my mind, but then we're influencing each other. Like I probably will never forget you, right? You'll influence me forever. And so now you're literally, I mean, whether you like it or not, you're now a part of my mind, right? So this is how we have to influence each other. And if we can do it in a positive direction, I mean, think about it. If integration is health, and integration is also the source of kindness and compassion, you got a win-win situation here. You're going to get people healthier. You're going to make people nicer to each other. You're going to make people have more meaning in life, more flexibility. Let's do it. It's just a matter of like doing it. So, time in. Good. Thank you. Any other questions or thoughts, comments? Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks a lot. I look forward to hearing from you whenever. Thanks.